All right, everybody, welcome back to our second Rake Trades LLC interview. Today, I am here with Alli. I got to give her credit and I got to give her the props that are due. She is my top student of all time, in my opinion, the student that I'm the most proud of. I'm incredibly happy to have her on for this conversation. So Alli, thank you for being on here. Where are you coming from right now? Where are you?
So I live in Europe now. Towards the end of last year, I actually left my Fortune 50 corporate job while I worked in sales and, had those crazy 80-hour-a-week things to go work for a nonprofit now. Where I actually have flexibility and freedom to trade and still do like what I want to do.
Crazy that you were able to. Now you literally went from a crazy successful job at a big company in America, in Indiana, if I'm not mistaken. Now you're living in Europe full time in Hungary and working for a nonprofit, doing what you want to be doing with your passion, right? Crazy, absolutely crazy. Well, Alli, I'm super excited to have you on here, and let's go ahead and dive right into this full conversation that we have.
Let's do it.
So, Alli, when is, we have it up here now, loaded out little bullet points of your trading career, but let's talk through each of them, right? So you started trading July 2020, right?
Right.
So what exactly got you into it? How did you first find out about it? What really got you into trading as a whole?
So it was kind of like actually a few years before that I was kind of interested in it, but didn't really know. And I followed this guy on like Instagram and I was like, how's he making all this money? Like, how's he doing all this? Like, what's happening? And so like, I kind of read some things, did some things on my own, like buying like random little stocks, but I was like, I don't know. So in 2020, I just decided to buy like a monthly membership to a Discord room that you happen to be in. And I was like, they started trading pennies and I was like, this is wild. You buy something, you walk away and you come back and I'm like, it's down 75%. I'm like, I'm out. This is not for me. I can't do this. And so I was just trying to be on YouTube, all these things, and everyone had indicators in their own like system and none of it was like for me. So I was like, all right, what's this options thing? And so I remember hopping into that room and being like, hey guys, can somebody tell me what an option is? Like, I don't understand. And you guys are like, hey, here's some YouTube videos. Good luck. And I really don't think anyone ever thought they'd hear from me again. And that's kind of how it started.
Sure. I remember you dove in head first, and I was, because I remember we that was the time before the options course had come out, the first one that we ever put together. Right. It was right before that. So it was before that like had really come together. The first thing, it was like sort of like, we're just gonna throw you into the fire. Here are some videos, and I wish you the best, right?
That's kind of how I felt. And I was like, all right. So I went home and I watched them. Like I studied, and I came back and I was like, all right, here's like all these questions I have. Can somebody explain them? And there's like 4 or 5 of you in that room, and I get an answer from this person or that person. And it was just like, everyone had their own strategy. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what's happening, but I'm just going to try it. So I actually bought my first like option, like beginning of July. I think I made $17 on it with Snapchat. Okay. And then like I took one with you and like, I think I made like $50 and I was like, oh, okay. Like that was like 6 minutes of work and I made like $50. Like, let's do this.
Right. That was the first glimpse of where it's like, holy crap. Like I just,
and I was like, I remember taking Walmart. I remember freaking out. It was like the 4th of July kind of thing. And I freaked out because I was like, somebody's like, hey, I think I'm going to swing Walmart. And I was like, it's $100. Like, should I do it? I don't know. Like kind of like freaking out here. And then like Walmart Plus news was announced, same day delivery. And like my $100 contract went up to like $1,000. And I sold for like 400. And I was like, yo, I'm in. Don't know anything, but I'll give you $1,000, Jake. I want to be smart about it. I want to be like risk adverse, but let's do it.
Let's do it, right? And you were hooked from that moment on. Yeah,
I was 100%. I was like, what happened?
That's very similar to how when I first made my first options trade and I made like 50% and I only had like $30 in it, but I was like, holy crap, like what? What do you mean I just made 50%? Or like all of a sudden it's like, holy crap, I just doubled my money overnight. Like that's not how this is supposed to work, right?
Right. It was the opposite of like what I had seen in pennies. And I was like,
right.
Oh, like this makes sense. And these are like names I know. Like I know what Twitter is. I know what Snapchat is. I know what Walmart is.
For me, that was one of the biggest things that drew me towards options, is that I was familiar with these names, right? I wasn't, when I was trading some of these penny stocks initially, it was like, because you and I had the same exact intro to it, right? We followed, his name is Stock Market Wolf Andrew. That's the person who introduced us both to trading. Both started with pennies and moved to options. And that was a big reason for me, is that I really liked trading names I was familiar with, right? Like the very first options trade I made was Cisco, which was a company that my dad worked for like 20 years. So I knew exactly who I was buying, right? And I knew I trusted that, right? Which made me just feel more comfortable with it, right? And like being comfortable trading is something we'll talk about this much more, but that's a huge portion of it, right?
Right.
If you're not comfortable, then Yeah. If you're not comfortable, then you're not going to be successful at this at all because you're just putting on too much risk.
Right. I at least felt comfortable if I walked away for like a business meeting or something, that stock wasn't going to go to zero.
Right.
And I didn't know that in pennies because that did happen to me. Bought something for like 70 cents, came back. I'm like, it's 6 cents. What happened?
It's like some offering or some crazy thing. It's like, oh,
right. I'm like,
oh.
I had like 5 shares. So like it wasn't enough for me to even know anything. But I was like, I just lost $3.
Yeah, it's like, that's not how this works, right? What? That math does not add up. Like, oh.
Yeah.
Okay, so you found trading in around July 2020, and I know you, or a little bit before that, then you started trading options during the July time. You got into it a little bit. I don't remember when exactly it was, but I want to say it was pretty close after that is when I had built an options course for that room, and it came out probably a couple months after that, right? That's when we released it.
Right. I was like, it was definitely towards the end of that year, like end of Q3, beginning of Q4 kind of thing.
Got it.
Somewhere
Yeah. And I remember you took that and you dove in, and something that just stuck out to me, and you know this to be true for everybody that we've ever met in Discord. You asked more questions than anybody I've ever met, but they were the best questions. They were the best questions, right? The questions that I always hated were are we still holding this? Blah, blah, blah. Like you were asking questions that were like, why are you doing this? Like, why are you buying this? Like here, like, right. And I was like, what do you mean why? Like I was used to people just following and not really paying attention as to why. And you're like, no, like I want to know why, right? And I was like, oh, I think this stock looks strong. And you're like, well, why? What makes it look strong? And I was like, well, it's up when everything else is like, well, what do you mean? And like you were very detail oriented with questions that to me never really got annoying. I mentioned this to you, and they never really got annoying because they're good questions, right? They were good questions. They weren't questions that were ultimately, because most people ask questions and really they have the goal of just figuring out, tell me what to buy and sell, right? That's what they're trying to get to their end game of. But that weren't what you were doing. So for that, you really stood out to me like right away when we first met in that July 2020. You could tell right away that you really wanted to learn this, right? So the other thing I really want to talk about here on a second bullet point is that kind of going along with that learning, you spent your entire first year, and we had to actually edit this because it was originally wrote out as a year, but it's 14, 15 months. You traded $1,000 account. You were trading a very small size, and you had a good job. So you had more money that you could have funded it with. That wasn't the problem, right? So go ahead and tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So honestly, that was like it for me, was just, I wanted to learn. I didn't care. Even as you were just saying that, I'm like, yeah, I want to know why. Like, why did you buy that? Why is it going strong? Like, as soon as you were talking with us saying that was what was going through my head, was the why. Like, why would you buy that? Why would you do that? Like, can you explain this to me? And that's all that 14 months was for me, was I want to learn why. I want to learn all the different strategies, credit spreads, debit spreads, like risk, like it's more risky to do this, more risky to day trade, swing trade. Like, I just wanted to understand it. And I didn't care if I made the money. If I lost that $1,000, at least I gained something valuable. If I made $100,000, then I probably did that the right way. And that's what I cared about. That was what mattered to me. Like, I know it was the bull market and you would see people buy something one day and the next day they're like, hey, I made $20,000. I'm like, cool, I made 50. And like, I was okay with that. Like, that was hard to get over, but like, I was okay with that because I knew I could last longer then.
Yeah, you had the longest lasting $1,000 account, I think, in options trading history. I gotta say, because I have never met someone because normally if you have $1,000 account, even if you make it last a month, 2 months, 3 months, and you start making money, most people will get to the stage where they'll go on tilt and they'll have a couple of bad days and they'll give that all back. And I know that you went through a few of those moments, and we'll talk about that for sure. But the fact that you were able to make that whole account last without blowing it, without it letting it go to zero, is something that like you deserve some credit for, right? Because that to me was when I sort of knew that you would make it at this long term, is because you weren't focused on the money, right? And I've said this before, I wish someone had told me when I first started, don't focus on the money year one, focus on the habits, right? Focus on that. And that's literally what you did, right? And that to me is somebody that's instantly, I sort of knew like, okay, she's going to make it, right? So that kind of leads us to this 2020 profits thing, which was, we were talking about before, it kind of came out flat, right? 2020, your first year, you didn't make much, you didn't lose much. It might've been plus 50, plus 100, plus 200, but nothing substantial, right? It was just flat.
And I was okay with that, because I actually remember one of the first conversations I had in that like room with you all that was substantial to me was, how do I become risk adverse? Like, how do I like risk this correctly? You know, if it's $1,000, I can't be taking a $400 contract. So what can I do?
Yep.
And so that's why I was like, that 2020 profits, like to me, it may say zero, but it was invaluable. Like, it's better than the 50,000 you see after that.
Yes, 100%, right? Because that to me, that's where you set your habits, right? That's where you set your habits and you sort of established your long-term priorities as a trader, right? And we'll always go through ups and downs, but I think you're really well equipped to handle those downs because of how you managed your initial start of your trading career, right? So again, huge kudos to that, because I did not have the discipline to do that in my first year, and it would have saved me a whole lot of headaches. So I remember it like it was yesterday, but I want you to take us through it a little bit. In 2021, and it was after a full year, right? So you started July, and I remember it was somewhere around the September stage or October stage of 2021, where you decided, I'm ready to put more money in my account. I'm ready to size this up a little bit. Tell me about what that experience was like.
Yeah, so as it was actually before that, even a little bit, it was like that July, August of like that 1 year mark. You and I had a one-on-one, and I was like, I feel like I need to size up, because like I can't stay at one contract forever, but I don't know that I'm like there yet to go. And you're like, hey, maybe go a little bit more, try with like 4,000 or 5,000, try with a few more, and then like slowly work your way up. Cause like I was more at that point into like the spreads and the swinging of trades, but I was like, at some point it doesn't make sense to swing 10 contracts of a spread when I could just buy a few naked. And so I kind of, that July and August, I took 5,000, 6,000 and started working with like, what does this look like for me? And then in September, like towards the end of it, I was like, all right, I'm going all in 25K. Like, let's do it.
Get over the PDT mark. Yep.
I'm going to size it up. Like I had a whole list of rules. Like I typed them, I printed them. I still keep them next to me. I'm like, no more than 5 to 7% on naked swings. No more than this. No more than this. Like, and I had all these rules and stipulations that I was going to do. And then I just started doing it. And part of that was maybe, buying 1 or 2 contracts to start out with, and then scaling up to 3, 4, 5 contracts, things like that. And like waiting for plays that I knew I could do rather than like forcing it. So there were days I took 2 trades and that was it. As to my $1,000 account, I may take 5 trades that are like $50. Something like that. It's like, it was a totally different shift in like perspective and focus.
But it was all the same principles and rules that you had been applying from before, right? Which is the best part, is that you were able to sort of switch, because there's no doubt it's different trading with 1,000 versus it's so different, right? It's so different. But if you had those core rules and principles, right, then you'll follow them, and that will allow you to continue even when you're sized up, right? And I think that for me, the part that's so interesting about your success in that end of 2021 was that you were able to make like $50,000 on that 25,000. We'll talk about that more in a second, but you were able to do that all by following the rules, right? You're not the type of person that you didn't have these big days by oversizing, right? You weren't you didn't take on too much risk in order to make these types of returns. You were following the same rules that you started all in the beginning with, right?
Honestly, I think I got more strict when I got a bigger size. Because I was like, to me, like, I'll tell anyone this, I think the psychology of a $1,000 account is probably the hardest to trade, because you are so limited and you have to have so much discipline. And so like when you get to that large account, you have some flexibility. You can maybe hide some of those bad habits you have for a while. And then, eventually you go on tilt, but for a while you can. So I knew as soon as I did that 4,000 or 5,000, I'm like, oh no, I'm going to need some serious rules. And so like I even added specific rules that I didn't have for a smaller account to this account. And I think that made the difference for me, was like adding those extra rules. So you can't swing this much of your account. You have to be out if this trade happens like this. You have to do these things. So I couldn't go on tilt. Like I had so many rules I didn't allow myself to.
Just perfect, right? And I remember, because even after, so here is from one of the discords that Alli and I were in November of last year, right? Before we had launched Rake Trades LLC and now worked together. I remember this day like it was yesterday for me, right? Because this was where you had hit the mark where you had made 50,000 off of that 25 in just a couple of months, and you had done it all the right way, right? And this is, I don't want to have this be misleading, because you still went through some hardships after this, right? This was not, not like this was a perfect clear shot, but that is insane, right? It's insane the way that you were able to take your smaller account, translate that to a larger account, and still maintain and manage your rules, right? That's really the hard part, I think, about it all. And you were able to do all of that.
Right. And I will say, like, doing that, because I did it in about 2 months, like there were a few days where I'm like, I felt like I got that little bit of cockiness that you kind of get, like people, you buy something, I'm like, I got this, I can do this, buy, like do this. And it was like, as soon as I do that, it would never fail. Boom, red day, or boom, bad trade. And I like, sometimes I did get out for a little bit of green, but it was like, I remember one day I bought shop, and like I was up probably $700-800, and I ended the day like red 3,000. And I was like, what just happened? And I was like, I went back on that trade. I'm like, okay, you broke 1 rule, you broke 2 rules, you broke 3 rules. I'm like, what did you do here? Like my psychology was not there, and like my rules weren't there, because I was like, I got this, it'll turn around, like we got this, like no big deal.
Right. And
And
just
it
assuming
definitely
about
was.
the market or some sort of rule break. It all comes
Right.
back to a rule break, right?
It
So it's
does. I was
just,
like, I broke more rules in that one trade than I think I probably did in most trades.
yep. And I actually think I remember because I scrolled through the profit loss section of this channel to find, because we wanted to make sure we had some sort of
Yep.
verified profits up from Alli. And for those, online, there's no paper accounts on Robinhood. So you can confirm this is real, right? They don't offer paper accounts. But as I was scrolling through it, I did notice there was a couple of red days in there, and you posted in there, you were like, I was up 2,500 in 8 minutes on shop today. All of a sudden I'm down 3K. Like, what happened? I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to reevaluate. Right. And I remember that to find this screenshot, I went through some good and bad. Right. So you see the ups and downs. And the part that I like about that is that this wasn't like a fluke. This wasn't a one-off. This wasn't like a couple of days that you got lucky and went big. So that's what you're talking about. This was consistent months of following rules with the pullbacks or the little drawdowns that all traders will face on some days, right? And you were able to keep pushing through and get to this point. So real quick, tell me, what did you do? I remember, what did you do once you hit the 75K mark? You withdrew it down, right?
So I remember I had a red day the very next day. It wasn't a big red day. I want to say it was like $600. It wasn't anything crazy, but I was like,
which is a totally reasonable loss on that side account.
I mean, for account that size, like totally fine.
Yeah, less than 1%.
But I was like, okay, no, like we need to draw this down a little bit. So I think I took it to 50K. And then I was like, all right, let's just see what kind of happens from here. And I believe I took it back down to 35. I took an extra little bit out, put it in a separate account. And I'm like, I bought some long-term things, which I wouldn't have now, but that kind of thing.
Yeah, that long-term is not looking pretty. I'll agree with you on that. I just stopped looking because I'm just going to focus on the next 10 years and hope that we figure some shit out.
Something happens. So I was like, I do remember I did that because of that. Because I was like, maybe I'll make it to 100K. Maybe I'll do this. And then I was like, I had the next day was red. And I'm like, no, you're focusing too much on the money now and not on like good trading, good principles. Like you've always said, it's not about the money. So as soon as I made it about the money, that even changed my psychology.
Right. Yep.
When you make it about your money, it makes it so much harder. You put all this extra pressure and things on yourself that you don't need.
And it's hard once you get to an account size where like you have $75,000 account and you have the ability to make $10,000 in a day. It's hard to not make it about the money, right? Because there are just certain times where it's a lot of money, right? Like it's thousands of dollars, right? And so it's hard for us to, as people, as human beings, to like try and cut that out and not feel that kind of attachment to it. And I think you're right. As soon as you feel that, as soon as that kind of comes into your head a little bit, then the right idea is to size it down and reduce that risk right away, right? And start to reduce, start to kind of take that position size off a little bit, right? Start to take that.
I withdrew. I took a few days off, and I was like, I've got to like refocus this, because I remember being disappointed that I was like, I made $500, and I'm like, there was a time like a year ago that would have been like a month for me. How am I disappointed in this? Like, I made $500 today. What are you talking about? You're disappointed. And so it was like that whole sizing down, focusing more on like what the chart says more than like I say. Right. A big thing. Yeah.
Because the chart is always going to reign supreme, right? That's going to be, we get stuck in our heads sometimes that we want to try and think that like we know what's going to happen next, and then kind of get stuck with our biases a little bit. But it's always the chart that reigns supreme.
Yep.
So shifting away from 2021, because that is incredible, right? That was an awesome year. And honestly, I have not been you're my most proud student to date, right? Just because I've never seen you're an example of like an A+ student, and without trying to like talk your ego up or whatever, but no, you really are, because this is when I work with people, and now you who work with people, right? If we could have our dream students, it would be the people who take the first full year to focus on learning. They're not worried about the small losses they take or the small wins. They're not focused on the money. And then when they are mentally ready, and when the market is in a favorable spot to size up and put some risk on and execute well, there's not much more you can ask for, right? There really is not much more that you could ask for. So again, I've got to give you some credit now, because you really gave me a sense of like pride, right? Because it was like, that was a student that really took what I said, listened, and then put her own twist on our style, right? You and I have a similar trading style, but it's not mirror image of each other. You prefer spreads and swings and all that, and you found the way that made you successful, and you did on your own. And so gives me a whole lot of pride. I'm very, very proud, right? I'm very, very proud, and it's awesome to see where you're at now. So, but moving on from 2021, what I'm curious about is 2022 has been very tricky. So what have you done
Definitely
to
has.
protect your capital, right? What have you done to risk off, so to speak, right? What's your way, how have you been handling this sort of market so far?
So I was like, I feel like January was still a solid month for me. Like I still did all right. I had my larger account, and then end of January, beginning of February hit, and I took my biggest loss I've ever taken.
Yeah.
And it was on like the stupidest thing. Like I could have ended the day minus $70, and it ended up being like minus 9,000. And I
Yeah.
was like, what did I just do? Like I even remember calling it happening. It was on Tesla, and I was like, okay, I was like, this looks like it's gonna, yep, failure to go higher. This is about to happen. And I was like, it'll be fine. Like we're gonna come down, retest this level, and go.
And then it'll
And
work.
I'm like, no, we ended up dropping like $60 that day.
Yeah.
My level got smashed, everything. And I was like, number one, withdraw this account.
Yeah.
So that was the first thing I did, was just I took my entire account down, put $1,000 in it.
Yeah.
And I created a second account and I put $1,000 in it. And I was
Mhm.
like, this is all you get. Like you got to figure out how to do this, because the market wasn't the same. Like as you said, I'm
Yeah.
a swing trader. I'm a spreads person. You can't do that in this market. Or you can very riskily, but like
Yeah.
it's not a fun thing. You're gonna have to pick and choose those opportunities. And so that was probably the first thing I did, was realize I'm gonna have to change my style some,
Mhm.
and that's okay.
That's
But
totally okay.
I have to be able to go back down to the basics then to do that. You don't want to change your style with the account you're used to trading.
Right. No, 100%. And I think honestly, that right there, just with how you answered that is, and what you did, because I knew that was what you did, right? I asked that question, but I knew. But that is the trait of like the best traders in the world, in my opinion, right? Like we talk about some of the ones that I personally still look up to, the Umar Ashos of the world, the Mike, trade like Mikes of the world. The things that they have in common above all else is their ability to say, oh, I'm just going to not touch this. I'm going to size down. I'm going to step back because this ain't my optimal conditions. And when these aren't our optimal conditions, especially if you're a long bias swing trader, how are you supposed to make money in 2022? You change your style, you adapt, and you size down. You don't focus, because these aren't your A+ setups, right? These aren't the setups that at the end of the year, nothing that's happened, none of these setups that have happened so far are going to be like our big winners, right? Both you and I speak. There's been a few, maybe 4, 5, 6 trades where there was good setups. We executed well. Like I remember like that snap daily 1, 2, 3 is the one that I always point to. When those setups come, we execute well on them. But I think it's the real sign of like a true professional trader when you're able to kind of say, hey, this is a risk-off environment, and I'm gonna sit this out, right? Because there's no need for me to put on this kind of extra risk.
I think that's actually been hard for me this year, because I was so used to trading like daily, or looking at setups, looking at long-term things, and there's just nothing to look at long-term. There's not a lot of setups.
No.
And so like having to learn that I can't trade daily has been like a whole new thing for me. Like I know a lot of traders struggle with that. Like I got to be in the market. I got to be in the market, and in these conditions, you don't have to be in the market. If you're going to be in the market, sit there and learn, sit there and mark your chart up higher, higher here, lower here. This is hitting this, like mark your chart up and like just learn what the price action's doing, but don't trade the money, because this is not the setup for it. Yeah. I think that's the hard thing for me.
It's been a hard thing. I think that's one of the hardest things in general, right? Is I think that's a huge, another one of those skills that the best traders have, is that early on in their career, and I think you exhibited this because you had your full first year of trading that 1K account, kind of a very similar idea, where you have to sit and watch screens so that you can have that chart time, that screen time, which is essential. But you have to have the ability to do that and not trade, right? You have to watch charts, learn, study how they're moving, but not necessarily trading them, right? Or if you are trading them, trading with $1,000 account for the purposes of learning, as opposed to, the purposes of making money, right? And that to me is such an impactful thing that will benefit people's trading careers in the long term, is if they're able to, in the short term, delay that gratification and focus on studying the charts, right? Getting the screen time without worrying about the money.
I mean, even for me, like that $1,000, like I'll tell anyone, like that was more for me to learn what an options contract did and how it moved. Like it was not about me learning to make money. It was me learning, okay, so like, we're spiking up and then we come down. Oh, this is what IV crush is. Oh, this is what this is. Like you hear all these things, but until you actually have live money on it, you don't know what it means and what it is. And so that's what a lot of that was for me, is just learning what that is, and then sitting there on the chart and being like, okay, we didn't get follow through here. We're retesting this. We're doing this. Like, this is what's happening.
Right. Being able to truly understand the charts in the background, right? In the background, right? Okay, so the other thing I wanted to talk about, I'm going through it because I had a little bit of a list of questions here. We've talked about your best months, right? Those October, Novembers, 2021s. We've talked about what when you started seeing progress, everything with your consistency and your rules. One thing I do want to talk about, and you actually were ahead of me on this, you sent me a little PDF, is the routine that you use as a trader for your daily routine. So let me stop this share really quickly. Let me open that up and share that so you can break down for us what exactly it is that you do on like a daily basis, right? So let me pull this up. I think we have the right one there. The daily routine. Is that what you're seeing?
Yep.
Perfect.
That's it.
So take the lead on this. Break this down for me. Let me zoom out a little bit so we can see it all.
Okay, so have it next to me because it's a little small.
Yeah.
So like for me, one of the first things I did, like when I lived in America, was I would check almost first thing in the morning, what is like the indexes doing? Are they, going red? Are they green? Like, what does that kind of look like? Because honestly, that kind of gives me my first sense of what's going to happen in the day. Am I going to feel long, short? Like, what am I going to feel? And then I read my rules. I just walk through that very quickly. This is it. I walk my dog, and on that walk with my dog, something that's changed for me in 2022 that I didn't do in 2021 enough is I start thinking through my psychology. I think about my day. How do I feel? Like, am I tired? Do I have a long day at work? Do I have this meeting? I start thinking through all those things. And like, is that day that I have going to impact my trading? And if it is, I'm not trading. Or is my trading, if I have a bad red day, is that going to impact my work? Then I'm probably not trading. Like, going through that is one of the first things I think that had to change for me, was like realizing I have emotions in this, and like trading can alter that. I'm not going to have, willingly have a bad day because of trading.
Right.
And so like, that's one of the first things I did. Then I scan my charts. I go through my watch list. I start looking like I already had plays usually from the night before, like stocks that were strong, stocks that maybe had earnings, things like that. I put them in a separate watch list. And so I go through those. If I don't like any of those, then I go through a whole nother watch list, and I just start scanning names, looking for things I like. There's nothing I like then I'm like, okay, probably not trading today.
Yeah, probably.
Or at least I'm going to wait. And so then I try to set some alerts on stocks. I'm like, okay, this one has like, something I'm interested in, but not until it gets over this level. And so, or over this like price. And so I'm like, okay, that's like, $4 away. We'll just set an alert. And if it happens, great, I'll look at it then. Then I physically write down my plan. I don't think enough traders do that.
Yeah.
Writing down your plan is a true plan. You're not just writing, oh, I'm watching Tesla, $1,000. You're saying, I'm watching Tesla at $1,000. If it goes over this $1,000, I'm going to enter here. I'm looking at these 3 sets of contracts. This is the reason I would get out. This is my stop loss. Like, you have to physically write that whole plan down. There's something about writing it down that just kind of, it puts it there next to you, but it also just puts it in there like, hey, this is mine. This is me. Like, I'm taking this on.
When you take the time to write it down, if you break and don't follow your plan, it feels terrible afterwards when you look back and you're like, oh man, my handwritten plan worked. I should have just followed my handwritten plan. I agree with you. I handwrite it every morning. Yep.
I think what's worse for me is when I write it down and I don't take it, and I take another trade that I didn't plan, and that plan fails. And I'm like, if I would have just followed this plan.
Follow the plan, right? If I just followed the plan.
This thing just went off like 12%. If I would have just followed this little plan I had, like I had it nailed, why did I not do it? So like, that's something I do. And like, after that, I actually determine like what strikes I'm looking at. I always have a backup set. I think that's part of just the questions in me. Like, if my stock, shoots up or shoots down, what's the backup strikes I can use? Like, where's already the volume? Where's where I'm going to guesstimate the prices at, that kind of thing. And then I add them all to my charts and everything like that. And about 5 or 10 minutes before the market opens, I go ahead and make that decision right then. Am I going to be willing to trade the open or not?
Right.
Like, because you have to make that decision. If you don't, you're probably going to end up entering something you didn't mean to enter. Or you meant to enter, but didn't mean to enter with a plan. And you're going to end up getting like crushed, or something's going to happen and it's not going to go out well for you.
To be firm. I'm either doing it or I'm sitting back first 10 minutes and there's no in between, right? That way you feel no FOMO like, if something happens at the agreement.
If it's a no for me, then like, I have to figure out what I'm going to do then to make sure I don't trade.
Right.
Because like, I'll see people say, I'm not going to trade the open. And then 10 minutes later they posted and like down 300. I'm like, I thought you weren't trading the open. Like, what just happened here? And so like,
my desk, it was so hard. The buttons were right there. I had to press the buttons. It's like,
right. So I'm like,
why were you in button pressing distance then? Right.
Yep. So I'm like, for me, if I say I'm not trading the open, sometimes I'll close TOS out. I'll go
Yep.
back. All right, Wrigley, we're going for a walk. I'll take my dog for a walk. Like
Mhm.
I'll do something, even if that's just like, hey, okay, I know I'd probably buy this on this account, disable this account, move my phone across the room. Like I'll do something to make sure I don't trade that first 10 or 15 minutes.
Right.
Because if I say I'm not and I do, I don't care if I make money. Like that makes me way more upset.
Yep. It's a rule break.
That's way
It's a
worse
rule break.
losing. Like,
Rule
yep.
breaks, which will ultimately lead to the tilt days, right? Old rule breaks
Right.
always lead to tilt days. We don't want them.
And it puts the rest of your trading day and like you're trying to catch up. You're trying to dig yourself out of this hole
Yep.
that you should have never been in because you told yourself you weren't going to be in it.
Yep.
So I hate that feeling. I've done that too many times. I think all of us have where we take a trade. You know, it may only be a $50 loss, but then that sets up your next trade. Your next trade, you're like, all right, I get out of this $50 loss. I got to do this. I got to do this. And like all this, and like, it's all this pressure in the world and you're forcing, then all these other rules you have get broken.
I'm ashamed to admit that on Friday morning, I tried to scalp Tesla calls totally like why we were selling off. I was bearish. I wanted shorts, but I tried to scalp on like a 2-minute thing, lost like 200 or 300 bucks. I was like, well, now I have to start my day. And it was end of the day fine. We had great trades on Friday, but it was like, why did I do that? Right? Like, the whole reason is because I told myself I wasn't going to trade the open. Then I sat at my screen and watched the open, and I was like, oh, maybe I can get a little scalp here. It's like, that was a terrible idea.
Something here.
Terrible idea.
Right. But if I decide I'm going to, then I check my emotions immediately because I feel like something about that last 5 or 10 minutes, like all of a sudden you get a little anxious, you get a little nervous.
Yep.
Like, is this not going to play out this way? Is this going to happen? You can start to feel all these things. And so like if you don't check that, then that's going to carry over and that's going to force something on you don't want to do. Exactly. So like I have to go through and check that. I have to write those down. Like I'm feeling anxious today. Is it okay that I still trade if this setup happens? So I kind of go through that. I glance over my rules again, like firm and hard. What are the rules you didn't pay attention to yesterday? So we need to focus on those today. Like that's kind of something I do. And that's most of my pre-market routine.
I love it. I love it. That's a perfect pre-market routine in my opinion, because it's something that it adds all the core principles that we talk about in a good pre-market routine, right? Scanning the market, setting yourself up to be successful, and then also your own twist on it, right? Like the walks with Wrigley, the reading your trading rules, kind of how does it prepare you individually for market open and how to maintain your, your discipline when that time comes, right?
Right. So, and I mean, I think you have to be disciplined in this, Jake, because like I can tell the days I don't do this. 100% can tell the days when I don't. Like I'm like, oh, I'm not going to write it down today. I posted it in the room. I don't need to write it down. I can tell when that happens. I can tell when I don't, think through my head of like my emotions, those things. It's like, this is where your rules start.
I could not agree more, because there are days still to this day where I will wake up and rather than going on my walk or doing my morning routine, I'll get into bed and I'll pull up my laptop on bed and I'll write my morning plan in the Rake's plan section, all that from my bed, and I'll do it from my bed rather than from my desk. And those are pretty much always the days. I don't always go on tilt on those days, but on the days that I have gone on tilt this year, I look back, it was always a day like that. It was a day where I didn't follow that initial routine. Instead, I did my routine from bed. I was way tired that day, whatever the case may be, all these different factors lining up, and those different little rule breaks, right? It could be as simple as breaking the rule that I didn't make my bed that morning leads me to not following my position size later that day, right? And we're not doing that. Oh, I didn't make my bed this morning. Well, I didn't have my full cup of coffee. Oh, I wasn't listening to my song. I didn't think about my emotions before. It's a snowball effect. It really is.
Yep, that's right. You have to start here and nail this. If you don't hit this right, something else is going to go down later, and you're going to make what happened. Well, let's look back.
It's like, well, let's look back. So Brooke, you also have the post trading on here, which is going to be my next follow-up questions, which is, how do you recap your trades, right? What do you look for to improve on green or red trades?
Right. So this is a little different than that. Most of my post trading is kind of like I actually scan for the next day, see if there's anything I like. Got it. Because I am more of a long-term swing trader. I usually look at the weekly chart, the monthly chart, the daily chart. I'll kind of go through that and see like what happened. Something I like to do, if I write a list of stocks down that I watch, I actually go back and check and see what happened in those. I'm like, did my plan work out? Was I not patient enough? Did I miss the trade because I wasn't patient? Did I miss the trade because I took something better, which is great? Like what happened and that forced me not to take that trade? Right. I know I'm not going to catch every move. Like nobody is. Nobody is. But can I learn from the moves? And that's what I look at. And so like, I know that happened this past week. There was a stock EMPH. Like I missed my initial entry. I was like, cool. I said I I wasn't going to trade the open, not a big deal, whatever.
Mhm.
Well, it came back down, retested, and I missed my entry, and I missed my entry again. And so I was like, okay, well, what could I learn from that trade? I'm like, if I would have taken my entry here rather than here, like this would have worked out. Like I could have done something better. And like I saw like what I could have done better. Things like that. So like I always like to go back and just see the things I looked at. I review the indexes, like where they went, like what happened with them, kind of like, because like you don't know, like you got to talk about all the time this past week, like, hey, we're still in an insider the day, like 2 days ago's range, like we're in this.
Yep.
If you don't look, you don't know that.
Yeah.
So after I'm trading and after the days ended, I kind of look at that too, like, hey, where are we at? What happened in the overall market? Not just in my little focus, but like in the overall market, what happened?
Right.
Because that matters. I mean, I
Oh,
don't want to be
100%.
I don't want to be long biased if we're about to like break down and go to 3,000 or something crazy.
Which is not off the table. Not off the table.
I know.
It's
I'm like,
craziness.
if something crazy happens, like I want to know that, and I don't want to be sitting here looking like, ooh, that looks like a good long chart. Let's go there. And then I actually do review my trades. I review my entries. I review my exits. I look at the indexes compared to my entries and exits. Because like you do see correlations at times, like
100%.
oh hey,
clues that you might have missed from that index.
right? I'm like, oh hey, look, they were failing. Oh, ES wasn't over the open, and NQ was like failing the open, and this happened. Why did I enter the trade then? Like, what was I thinking was going to happen here? So like I look through all of that, and then I review my emotions, which is something I don't think I thought about a lot in the past until this year. Is like how I felt in a trade, because like we all get frustrated, like, oh, I left this trade and it ran an extra $10, or oh, this happened. But like we don't look at it and say, oh, I got out and it died $10. Like what made me get out? What was my emotions there versus what was my emotions when it ran farther? Like I kind of compare emotions, like how did I feel during that trade? Figure all that out. And then I just kind of add my stocks to like where it's at. And then I look at other people's stuff, like what they did that day.
Right. Yeah.
Like there'd be times I'm like, hey, like what Jake take? Why did Jake take that? I would have never taken that. So like, let me look. And then I'm like, oh, I see what you did there, Jake. Okay, good job. Like, things like that. Or sometimes like you are inverse of a person. I know that happened a few times where like I'm like long on something and they're short, and I'm like, gotta go review why they were short.
Right.
And it's
what was the opportunity there?
Right. And I'm like, they may have had like a scalp as where I'm long in a monthly contract. Like, I don't care about that scalp then, but it's good to learn from. So like that's usually what my post trade looks like.
I love it. Again, there's been multiple times today where I've asked a question. Your answer to me has been the answer of like a professional trader, right? Because a professional trader doesn't only review their entries, their exits, all that. They review the emotions of how they were feeling during that, because ultimately we have our strategy down, right? We have our strategy down. We're very fortunate enough as traders that while we'll learn and adapt to new markets, our core principles and strategy, at least I don't think we'll ever change them. I don't think we'll ever look for new levels or new buy and sell setups.
I don't plan on it.
Right. Yeah, I don't plan on it. Right. And so for us, looking and reviewing the technicals of our trade is always important, but it's almost more important, I think, to review the emotion parts of it. Right. And so just again, I mean, that's a professional trader type of answer, right? Is that I want to understand what were my emotions going on during these moments, during these trades, right? What was I really feeling? What was the thoughts going through my head in these, right?
Right. And I think if like you look at traders from 2020 and 2021, even like they didn't have to do that. Like you really did need to look at your emotions, like buy, come back. And honestly, I think that actually hurt me some in the beginning, is because like I was so like emotion, like I wouldn't say emotion, I was so like risk-based and like focused on doing it the right way, that I didn't hold for the moon, or like, for Tesla to see 1,000 when it was like 600. Like I didn't do those things. And so like going now to it, I see the importance of the emotions, and I'm like, if I could go back again, that would be the one thing I would change. I'm happy with everything else I did, but I would go back and focus on the emotions at the beginning, because there were days, like I still remember that there were days I'd get mad that I closed out something and then like it went off for 25% more, and I'm like, why am I mad about 25%, and why am I mad about this? Like, why did you get out of the trade then? Like, what made you get out? Why didn't you just move a stop? Why didn't you just do this? So I would say that'd be the one thing I would try to fix, if I could go back and redo it, would like focus on the emotions now, because you get a market like this and it's almost all emotions. I feel this market all emotions, more emotions than it is like technicals.
Yeah, 100%, because the emotions part of it is there are constantly going to be in this current market, there are good scalp opportunities setting up all the times. But the problem is you have to have the emotions to handle that. We need to be in scalp mindset. And if we're in a scalp mindset and something makes a crazy big move afterwards, we can't be upset that we didn't hold for the big move, because that's not the market we're in right now, right? We're not in the big move market where we can capitalize and hold those. So it's tough, right? And that's where the emotions will really come and hammer you, right? So I think I completely agree with you. I wish I had mapped out my emotions earlier on in my trading career. It would have saved me so many headaches, right? And so much stress, really, right?
Right.
So much stress. Okay, so just to sort of wrap up as we're getting towards the tail end of the questions I have here, after all the success and the hardships that you've gone through over the last, coming up on 2 years now as a trader, what is the number one piece of advice you would give for a trader who's just starting out? What would be the first thing that you would tell them in terms of what to focus on, what their energy should be on? What would be that biggest sort of overarching piece of advice you'd give?
That's a difficult one. I'm like, I feel like you don't want to write a
right?
book
You can
on
probably have a few different answers. You can have a few different answers.
Right. I'm sitting here, I'm like, I feel like I could write a book on like, hey, these are the things you need to focus on. And like, you would be way better off than that. I would definitely say the first thing you have to focus on is like being okay with not making money and not comparing yourself to others. Because I think that's the difficult thing is like when you need the money and you want the money, it becomes a completely different psychology and you don't allow yourself to learn. You don't allow yourself to develop rules. You don't allow yourself to do all these things because you're constantly comparing yourself to the guy on Instagram or in your other trading group that, posted 2,500 and you're like, I have a $500 account. How do I make that happen tomorrow? Like you just so focus so much on the money that you don't allow yourself to get further. And then you blow up and then you're ready to quit and you're done.
Yep.
So I would definitely say that's probably the first thing is like, don't focus on the money or make it about the money because it's not going to be about the money then. It's going to be about all the ways you didn't do something you wanted to do.
And honestly, just that piece of advice from you, I'd say is that you're a living piece of example of that advice, right? Because you spent the full first year not worried about the money. And then as soon as you sized up, you were capitalized, right? You executed, right? And so all that time not worrying about the money paid off, right? It really did pay off.
Right. I mean, I can't say it wasn't hard because it was like, it would be so frustrating at times. And I'd be like, how did that guy who doesn't even know like what anything is, he has like 50 indicators on here. And he's like, yeah, this, and this. I'm like, it looks like a disco light. Like what's happening here? How did you just make $5,000? And I've been doing this for 6 months and I'm at like 200. Like what just happened? So, I mean, that's frustrating, but at the end, like it was always worth it to come back to of like, I kind of look at it like golf. Like, there's people who like drive the ball or you really far, people who putt well, people who swing trade, people who scalp, like you have all these things, but golf is a lot of psychology. Trading is a lot of psychology.
Yes.
And if you get that right at first and you get that right from the beginning, you can play until you're 50, 60, 70 years old. Like you can do this for a long time. And like, I would rather do that than be the person at the driving range, just hitting, hoping I get something right. That's kind of like, it was hard, but that's how I felt.
Well, here's the other thing I'll say that kind of stuck with me as you were saying that is that, it was tough in that first year where you would make 200 and you'd see somebody who didn't necessarily know what they were doing make 5,000, but it was just, they were YOLOing in an easy market, right? I think that you and I can now both speak to that. Now with you working with students, how many people have you worked with that made that kind of money in 2020 and 2021 and then lost it all in 2022 because they can't maintain it, right? So it's tough in the moment, but now it's all comes full circle where I'm sure that you've worked with people and that you've had lessons with people who made that $5,000 the same day you made 50 in 2020 and then now they're working and doing lessons with you because they couldn't hold on to any of that profit, right? They didn't have any emotions or rules following, right?
Right. Like they didn't, withdraw. Like, you talk to somebody and they're like, yeah, I made, $90,000. And I'm like, you did what? Like, tell me more. Like, how you did that? Like, I'm here for that. And then like they start talking through it and I'm like, you lost that, you made it back, you lost it again. Did you ever withdraw like at least your original investment? Did you ever like did any of these things happen? And it's like, no. And they're like, that's why I'm here. Like, I thought this was happening and now this is happening. And I'm like, okay, first of all, do you want to do this long-term? Like, do you want to be here for the next 50 years? Because like, that's going to be step one. Because if you do, this is going to be a whole lot harder of a process than just waking up in a week and you all of a sudden happen like 90K.
this is going to be like, you have to train like an athlete for your career.
Right.
If you want to do this for the long term, right? You're going to have to train your mind the same way an athlete would train their body, in my opinion, in order to do this for the long term, right? You have to take it as seriously as they do, right?
You have to take the psychology of it specifically. Like you can
Mhm.
learn some charts and that's great. Like
Yep.
there's 1,000 different ways somebody can chart something and, figure out technical analysis. People who trade, usually aren't great at technical analysis. They're great at psychology. They're great at knowing themselves.
Yep.
Like the best traders you see know themselves better than anything. Like people chart well, but that doesn't mean they execute well.
Yeah.
And that's where I think the difference is.
100%. I remember one of the lines that's always stuck with me a lot has been, the best traders in the world it has nothing to do with their abilities, yet their discipline, right? The best traders and the best investors in the world, their abilities don't mean nearly as much as their discipline, right? Their abilities are their discipline. That's really where the edge comes from, is how disciplined are you? How psychologically sound are you, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, because I've seen people like, nail the technical analysis. They have everything charted out. I'm like, this is, it could be in a museum. It's a masterpiece.
Yep.
And they come to like, the trading side of it. And I'm like, how did you end up red? Like you just nailed, like everything here is nailed. And it's like, I oversized. I ended up buying this. I held too long. I did all these things. And I'm like, okay, like the execution matters. Like who you are and like your psychology matters.
Yep. 100%. 100%. Okay. Well, Alli, this has been awesome. This has been a great conversation. And for those of you who are not familiar, not in the room, and work with us on a daily basis, Alli has gone from a student of mine to now a partner. She's part of the team. She is one of the lead moderators that we have in our room, posting signals. She does more one-on-one lessons than anybody I know. She's the one-on-one lesson queen. So if you're interested in doing a one-on-one lesson or working with her, you can find her Instagram in the section below. So please feel free to follow her. I would love if you would follow her and show some support to her. And other than that, Alli, did you have anything else that you wanted to add at the end?
I mean, I really don't think so. I would just say, like, if you're going to trade or think about trading, you need to think about like what you want to get out of it. Is it going to be a long-term thing, or is it just going to be like, this is a fun hobby? You need to make that distinction at the beginning.
And if you had one little thing one piece of advice that you would say to somebody who's struggling right now, what would that be to them? What would you say to them to sort of say, keep pushing through? Is there anything a little piece of advice?
I would say step back and look at yourself before you look at your chart.
Yeah.
Because usually it's something with you, not with what you're doing in the chart.
I love it. That's perfect. I would have a very similar answer. It's something going on up here, not what's going on in your strategy. So,
that happens to the world's best traders. Like, don't think it's just you. I mean, you've seen 100%. That across the industry this year. Like we've had our world's best traders like had red days. I'm trading 1 out of every 5 days. So don't think it's just you.
100%. Well, Alli, thank you so much. This has been so much fun. And we'll have to do it again now. No, hopefully what we'll do next time, I'm thinking, so I want to do a few more interviews with all the team members, right? With everybody else. And then I want to do a big group conversation sometime soon where we just have everybody on and we just talk about trading and talk about, what's going on, and maybe even have people on and kind of have like some of that roundtable we had, but just with us, right? And have it be like an us thing. So yeah, this has been great.
It's crazy how we all learn from you basically, but we all still have our different style.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Everybody's an individual. That's what I love about it the most, is that we all learned a similar principle and strategies, the ones that I was taught and I learned, I kind of passed those on, but everybody put their own twist on it, right? No one person on our team trades exactly the way I do, right? Which I love. And we all, because it kind of challenges us to always be learning, right? And always be learning. But at the same time, I will never have to strategy hunt on a YouTube video again. And that makes me so happy, right? Because I spent years hunting for a strategy on YouTube or something that I could do long-term. And that makes me really happy. So we hope you all enjoyed this interview, and we look forward to seeing you on Instagram or in the Discord. So thank you very much, everybody. And Alli, thank you again.
Thanks. See you.